I never imagined that the house I spent 32 years paying for would be the place where my daughter-in-law would look me dead in the eye and tell me I was no longer welcome. It was a Sunday afternoon in October, the kind where the leaves outside turn gold, and the air smells like cinnamon and wood smoke. My daughter-in-law had arranged what she called a little gathering in my living room, with my furniture, in the home I had raised my son in since he was 4 years old. She had invited her college friends, her co-workers, her book club. She had rearranged my furniture, replaced my centerpiece with some trendy dried flower arrangement she bought on Etsy. And when I walked downstairs in my own home at 2 in the afternoon, she pulled me aside with a smile so tight it could have cut glass. "We need to talk," she whispered, steering me toward the hallway. "My friends are here, and honestly, you hovering makes everyone uncomfortable. Maybe you could just stay upstairs for the afternoon? Or run some errands." I stared at her. This is my home. Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes went cold. "And we live here too. I'm just asking you to give us some space. Is that too much to ask?" Before I could respond, she had already turned back toward the living room, laughing at something one of her friends said, her hand smoothing the front of the blouse she had borrowed from my closet without asking. I stood in that hallway for a long moment. Then I walked quietly to the kitchen, picked up my car keys from the hook by the door, the hook my late husband had installed in 1987, and I left. Not because she had any right to ask me to, but because I needed to sit with what had just happened before I said or did something I couldn't take back. Sitting in the parking lot of the grocery store 2 miles away, engine running, I tried to remember when my son's wife had stopped being grateful and started being entitled. The honest answer was that it had happened so gradually I had not noticed it until it was everywhere. They had moved in 3 years ago. My son had lost his job in the middle of a restructuring at his company, and his wife had just taken a pay cut to transition careers. They needed help just for a few months, they said. I had said yes immediately. Of course I had. He was my only child. I had raised him alone after his father passed when my son was 16, working double shifts as a registered nurse to keep the lights on and put him through college. Saying no to him had never come naturally to me. 3 months became 6. 6 became a year. A year became 3. In that time, I had covered the utilities. I had stocked the refrigerator. When my daughter-in-law decided she wanted to redecorate, I had handed over my credit card and told her to make the house feel like her own. When her car needed new tires, I paid for them. When they wanted a vacation to Charleston, I quietly tucked an envelope of cash into my son's jacket pocket and told him to take his wife somewhere nice. My son had gotten a new job within the first year, a good one. His wife was earning more than ever now. But the moving out conversation never came, and I had never pushed it because I told myself I had the space, I had the means, and they were family. What I had not told myself, what I had refused to see, was that somewhere in those 3 years, the dynamic had shifted completely. I had gone from being their mother and benefactor to being an inconvenience in my own home. The morning after the party, I came downstairs to find my living room rearranged back to normal, the dried flowers still on my table. My daughter-in-law was at the kitchen island, scrolling her phone, not looking up when I walked in. "Good morning," I said. "Morning," she replied, still not looking up. I poured my coffee and stood at the window, watching the backyard. The garden I had planted myself, the bird feeder my husband had put up the summer before he died, my home, my life. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," I started. She finally looked up. I wasn't trying to be rude. I just needed space for my friends. "It's my house," I said, keeping my voice level. "We live here too," she replied. Same words as yesterday, same tone. As if repetition made them more valid. "You knew what you were agreeing to when you let us move in. This is our home now." I looked at her for a long moment. "No," I said. "It's not." She set her phone down and crossed her arms. "You know what your problem is? You can't let go." Your son is a grown man. He doesn't need his mother monitoring every room he walks into. We have given up our privacy, our independence, our whole lives to be here because you needed the company after Dad died. The rewriting of history was so smooth, so practiced, that for a half second I almost believed it. Then I remembered the night they had shown up with 2 SUVs full of boxes and my son's eyes, red-rimmed, asking if they could please stay just until they got back on their feet. I'm going to see my friend Carol today, I said. I set my coffee mug in the sink, picked up my purse, and walked out without another word. Carol had been my closest friend since nursing school. She lived 20 minutes away in a tidy townhouse full of plants and good coffee, and the kind of no-nonsense honesty I had been missing in my own home. I sat at her kitchen table and told her everything: the party, the hallway conversation, the 3 years of erosion I had been too willing to excuse. Carol listened without interrupting. Then she refilled my coffee and said, "Margaret, when was the last time you felt comfortable in your own home?" The question knocked the air out of me. "I don't know," I admitted. "That's your answer," she said. I drove home that evening with something new sitting in my chest, something that felt like the earliest stage of a decision. I wasn't ready to act on it yet, but I was done ignoring it. The decision became unavoidable 2 days later, on a Tuesday morning when I received a call from my bank. "Mrs. Patterson?" the woman on the line said. "I'm calling from First National regarding a recent inquiry on your home equity account. We received a request last Thursday to add an authorized user and initiate a transfer of equity verification documents. As your sole account holder, we needed to confirm this came from you." I set down the dish I was drying. "I didn't make any such request." A pause. "I see. So you did not authorize anyone to contact us regarding your home equity line?" "I absolutely did not." Another pause. "I'm glad you clarified that. We've placed a hold on the request. I'd suggest you come into the branch at your earliest convenience to review the account and update your security protocols." I stood in my kitchen for a long time after I hung up. Then I walked upstairs to my home office and opened my filing cabinet, the folder containing my mortgage documents, my home equity paperwork, my title deed. It was still there. But when I opened it, I noticed the stack was slightly disordered, as if someone had gone through it and replaced the papers in a hurry. My daughter-in-law worked from home every Tuesday. I did not confront her that night. I went to bed, lay awake until 2 in the morning, and by the time the sun came up, the decision that had been forming in my chest since Carol's kitchen had hardened into something unshakable. I was at the office of my attorney, a woman named Patricia, who had handled my husband's estate. By 9:30 the next morning, I told her everything. The living situation, the 3 years, the party, and then the phone call from the bank. Patricia's expression remained professional, but her pen stopped moving midway through my account of the bank inquiry. "That's potentially criminal," she said. "Attempting to access a home equity account without authorization, using someone else's documents to initiate a transfer that falls under financial fraud." "She's my daughter-in-law," I said, hearing how hollow that sounded even as I said it. Patricia looked at me steadily. "That doesn't change what she did. It may actually complicate it if you choose not to report it, because it signals to her that there are no consequences." She set her pen down. "What do you want, Margaret? What outcome are you looking for?" I had thought about this all night. "I want my home back," I said. "I want them out. And I want to make sure whatever she was trying to do with that account cannot happen again." Patricia nodded. "Then here's what we're going to do." By noon, a formal notice of intent to reclaim primary residence had been drafted, citing the verbal agreement that the living arrangement was temporary and that a reasonable 60-day notice to vacate would apply. Patricia also contacted the bank directly on my behalf to flag the unauthorized inquiry and request a full security review of my accounts. She recommended I also have my will reviewed, which I had not updated since before they moved in. I sat in her office and went through it page by page. The draft I had written 3 years ago left the house to my son outright. By the time I left Patricia's office, the updated version left the house to a trust I controlled, with specific conditions attached to any inheritance. My son would benefit from my estate only if our relationship remained one of mutual respect, defined by terms Patricia helped me articulate in plain language. It was not a punishment. It was a boundary with teeth. I had the 60-day notice hand-delivered to the house that afternoon. I was not there when they received it. I had gone back to Carol's and was sitting on her back porch drinking iced tea when my phone began ringing. My son first. Then my daughter-in-law. Then my son again. I watched the screen light up and let every call go to voicemail. His first message was confused. His second was upset. His third, left around 7 that evening, was quiet in a way that told me he had finally read the notice carefully. "Mom, I think we need to talk. Please call me back." My daughter-in-law did not leave voicemails. She sent texts, 12 of them, ranging from disbelief to accusation to a final one that read, "After everything we gave up to be there for you, this is how you treat us. You should be ashamed of yourself." I set my phone face down on Carol's coffee table and did not pick it up again until morning. My son came to the door the next day. I let him in. We sat in the living room, the same room where his wife had hosted her party, where she had suggested I make myself scarce in my own home, and I let him talk first. He looked exhausted. He was pale, and there was something in his face that I recognized from when he was a teenager and had done something he knew was wrong and was trying to find the words to admit it. "I didn't know about the bank," he said. "I want you to know that." She told me she was researching refinancing options for when we eventually buy a place. She said she was just looking into what equity you had so she could understand the market. I didn't know she had contacted them directly. "Did you know she went through my filing cabinet?" I asked. He closed his eyes briefly. "I suspected something. I didn't ask because I didn't want to know." He looked up. "That's not an excuse. That's the truth." "No," I said. "It isn't an excuse." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I've let her drive too much of how we live. I've been watching her treat you badly for 2 years, and I told myself it was personality differences. That you were both strong women. I made excuses because it was easier than having the harder conversation." He swallowed. "I'm sorry, Mom. I mean that." "I know you do," I said. And I did. My son was not malicious. He was weak in the way that many people are weak, avoidant, conflict-averse, willing to let someone else steer as long as he didn't have to argue. But weakness is not innocence, and I was no longer going to treat it as such. "What happens now?" he asked. "You have 60 days, I said. "That gives you enough time to find a rental. I'll help with the deposit if you need it. But that's the last financial help you'll receive from me until we've had a lot more honest conversations than this one." He nodded slowly. "And her? Are you going to press charges?" I had thought about this more than anything else. "I've reported the unauthorized inquiry to the bank. What they do from here is up to them. Patricia has documented everything. Whether it goes further depends on whether it happens again." He understood what I was not quite saying, that I was giving them a door to exit through with dignity. But the key to that door was his wife's choices going forward. My daughter-in-law did not apologize. She never did. What she did instead was post on Facebook. I saw it because a woman from my church texted me a screenshot. The post was long and tearful, written in the breathless, victimized tone of someone who had rehearsed it. She wrote about how she had sacrificed the best years of her life caring for a lonely, controlling older woman. She wrote that she had only tried to help manage the household finances because I was clearly overwhelmed. She wrote that I had repaid her kindness by throwing them out with no warning. She ended with a request for prayers and a line that made my jaw tighten. "Blood means nothing to some people." The comments filled quickly. Friends who didn't know me expressed outrage on her behalf. A few people from my son's workplace, people I had cooked dinner for in my own home, wrote things like, "Stay strong and you deserve better." I did not respond. I did not comment. I called Patricia and forwarded the screenshot. "Defamation," Patricia said simply. "The claim that you were overwhelmed and that she was managing finances on your behalf is a direct misrepresentation. Combined with the bank inquiry, she is building a narrative to support what she tried to do legally and failed. She paused. I'll add this to the file. And Margaret, do not engage online. Let her keep talking. As it turned out, letting her keep talking was the most effective strategy I could have followed. Within 48 hours, the comments on her post had shifted. A neighbor of mine who had been at her party, a woman whose name I barely knew, replied with a single sentence, "I was there that Sunday." She told her mother-in-law to stay upstairs in her own house. Then, a woman from my church posted, "Margaret Patterson has been a pillar of this community for 30 years. She volunteered every Christmas at the hospital. She cared for her husband alone through 2 years of illness. Whatever story you are telling, I know this woman, and she is no one's burden." Then someone who had clearly done some digging pointed out that the house in question was titled solely in my name, purchased before my son was born, and that no caregiving arrangement had ever been formalized or compensated. My daughter-in-law deleted the post by Thursday morning. By then, it had been screenshotted approximately 400 times and shared in 3 different neighborhood Facebook groups. I heard about it from Carol, who called me laughing, which made me laugh too, which was something I hadn't done in what felt like a very long time. They moved out in 44 days, not 60. My daughter-in-law left without saying goodbye. My son hugged me at the door on a rainy Saturday morning, held on for a moment longer than I expected, and said, "I'm going to be better. I'm going to figure out how to be better." "I know you will," I told him, "because you don't have a choice anymore." He smiled at that. A small, painful smile. Fair enough. I stood in my doorway and watched them drive away. The street was quiet. Inside, my house was slightly emptier than it had been that morning they had taken their furniture. The new pieces my daughter-in-law had bought with my credit card. But every inch of it was mine. The walls, the floors, the hook by the door where my husband had hung his keys. Mine. I closed the door, stood in the hallway, and breathed. The weeks that followed were quiet, in a way that took some adjusting to. I had grown so accustomed to the low-grade tension of sharing my space, to self-editing my movements and my words, that the absence of it felt disorienting at first. I would walk into the kitchen in the morning and brace myself for the particular chill of my daughter-in-law's silence, before remembering that the kitchen was simply the kitchen now. No performance required. I called my son every Sunday. Our conversations were short at first, careful, like people learning to walk on ice. He was in therapy, he had told me that on the phone 2 weeks after moving out, in a voice that suggested he expected me to congratulate him and also expected that I wouldn't, and I did neither. I simply said that was good and that I was glad. What I did not know, until a mutual friend mentioned it in passing, was that my daughter-in-law had filed for divorce 6 weeks after they moved out. I sat with that information for a while, turning it over. I did not feel triumphant. I felt sad in the particular way that you feel sad about something that was probably inevitable and probably necessary. My son had bent himself into terrible shapes trying to keep her happy, and in doing so had become someone I barely recognized. Losing her would hurt him, but the version of him who showed up at my door that morning, pale and honest and sorry, was already closer to the son I knew than the man who had stood in rooms watching her dismiss me and said nothing. He called me the night she served him the papers. We talked for 2 hours. It was the longest conversation we had had in years that did not involve logistics or money or conflict. We talked about his father, about the house, about a family trip we had taken to Colorado when he was 12 that we had somehow never discussed as adults. At the end of the call, he said, "I don't know how you did it, Mom. After Dad died, all of it, alone. I wasn't always graceful about it," I told him. "You were always there," he said. "That's different from graceful." I went back to Patricia's office and updated my will again. Not dramatically, I restored the basic structure, though I kept the trust in place and the conditions I had outlined. What I changed was the letter of intent I attached, the one explaining the reasoning behind my decisions. I had written the first draft in anger. I rewrote it in something closer to clarity. What I wrote, in part, was this: I have spent most of my adult life measuring my love by what I was willing to give. I thought that generosity was the same as love. I know now that they are not the same. Real love requires honesty, which means sometimes love looks like a door closing. It means sometimes the kindest thing you can offer someone is a clear, firm no. Carol read it over coffee one afternoon and looked up at me with something I did not expect to see in her expression. It was something like awe. "You should do something with this," she said. "It's a legal document, Carol. The feeling in it," she said. "Not the legal parts. The rest." I thought about that for a while. I had, at the suggestion of my old nursing colleague Diane, started attending a weekly gathering of women, all of us over 55. Most of us navigating some version of the same hard season. Adult children who had grown into strangers. Marriages that had required reconstruction after decades of quiet erosion. The particular exhaustion of being the person everyone relied on without ever asking whether you were all right. The week after my conversation with Carol, I told my story at that gathering for the first time. Not all of it, just the broad shape, the house, the party, the bank call, what came after. When I finished, the room was quiet in a way that felt full rather than empty. A woman named Ruth, who I had spoken to only briefly before, looked at me and said, "I have been trying to find the courage to have that exact conversation with my son for 4 years. 4 years. She pressed her lips together. Tell me what it felt like. Not what happened. What it felt like. I thought about it honestly. The day I called my attorney, it felt like I was doing something wrong. Like I was being cruel. I paused. By the time I got home that afternoon, it felt like I had stopped drowning. Ruth nodded slowly. That's what I needed to hear. That was how I ended up facilitating the group 6 months later, which was how I ended up being asked to speak at a local women's conference the following spring, which was how I found myself standing at a podium in front of 300 women who had driven from 4 states over on a Saturday morning, preparing to talk about what happens when you finally decide that love without self-respect is not love at all. I had written notes, but I didn't use them. I just talked. I told them about the hallway, about the bank call, about the Saturday morning I stood in my doorway and watched them drive away. I told them about the 2-hour phone call with my son. I told them about the letter in my will that I had written and rewritten until it said exactly what I meant. Afterward, a woman about my age found me by the coffee table. She was well dressed, with the careful composure of someone who had been holding themselves together for a very long time. "My daughter-in-law has my credit card information," she said quietly. "I gave it to her 2 years ago for a grocery emergency, and she never stopped using it." She looked at me steadily. "I've been too afraid of losing my son to say anything." "Call your bank today," I told her. "Not tomorrow. Today." She nodded. She looked like she was about to cry, and also like she hadn't cried in months, and could not afford to start in the middle of a hotel conference room. I understood that feeling exactly. "It's going to feel wrong at first," I said. "Do it anyway. My son and I have lunch on the first Tuesday of every month now. He is quieter than he used to be, more deliberate. His therapist, he told me once, had him write a letter to me that he had not sent, and when he described what was in it, we sat for a long time without saying anything. Some things don't need a response. They just need to be acknowledged. He has not started dating again. He is not ready. I don't push. What I push for now are the things I spent 30 years postponing. I enrolled in a photography class at the community center. I booked a trip to the Pacific Northwest, somewhere I had always wanted to go, and spent 2 weeks hiking trails and photographing fog coming in off the water. I called old friends I had lost touch with, women I had known in my 20s and 30s who had drifted away during the years when I was too busy surviving to maintain connections. I painted my living room a deep, warm green, a color my daughter-in-law had once called depressing. It is the best room in the house now. On a Sunday evening in March, I was sitting in that living room with a book and a glass of red wine when my phone lit up with a text from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Then I opened it. It was from a woman in Minnesota. She had seen a clip of my conference talk. shared by someone in a Facebook group for mothers of adult children. She wrote, I sat in my car outside my son's apartment for 20 minutes last week, working up the nerve to go in and have a conversation I've been avoiding for 2 years. I played your talk on my phone while I sat there. Then I went in. It went badly, and then it went better, and now we're having dinner on Friday. I just wanted to thank you. I set my phone down and looked at the green walls of my living room, at the bird feeder visible through the window, at the hook by the front door where my keys hung next to a small photograph of my husband, taken the summer before he died, laughing at something just off camera. I had spent so many years being the person other people needed me to be. The accommodating housemate, the woman who wrote checks and stayed upstairs when asked and told herself it was love when it was actually fear. Fear of the empty chair across the table, fear of needing too much, fear that if I ever stopped giving, everyone I loved would simply leave. What I know now is that the people worth keeping do not leave when you stop giving everything. They stay differently. They stay with more honesty, more care, more of the kind of presence that can only happen when both people are standing on solid ground. My son texted me last Tuesday after our lunch. Just 3 words, thank you, Mom. I didn't ask what for. I already knew. I am 63 years old. And I am still learning what it means to take up the right amount of space in my own life. Some days that is harder than others. Some days I still reach for the old habit, the reflexive yes, the smoothing over instinct that served me so well for so long and cost me so much. But then I sit in my green living room, in my home, in the life I have spent 32 years building, and I remember the sound of my own voice in Patricia's office saying I want my home back, and the steadiness of it, how it did not shake. That steadiness is mine. No one else put it there, and no one is taking it from me again.